It happens in a single moment. A door closes without a word. A call goes unanswered. A presence that once anchored you disappears. And suddenly the world feels heavier, quieter, colder. You are left standing in the emptiness, your mind racing with questions you cannot answer. The silence is deafening. It presses against your chest. It whispers all the things no one will say. Was it something I did? Was it never real? Am I not enough? If you've ever been abandoned without explanation, you know the ache of this sudden stillness, the shock that jars your heart and unsettles the ground beneath your feet. The sting of unanswered questions. The worst part is not just the absence. It's the questions that multiply. Why did they leave? Did I push too hard or not enough? Was any of it ever real? Every unanswered call, every unopened message becomes a mirror reflecting your doubts. And in that reflection, you confront something far deeper than disappointment. You confront your own vulnerability, the fragility of trust, the longing for connection. Story: Mara's vanishing. Mara had always felt secure in her closest relationships. Her best friend called regularly. They shared secrets, dreams, and small everyday moments. Then one day, Mara's messages went unanswered. Days turned into weeks. When she saw her friend, there was no explanation, only distance. The sudden silence was a storm that left Mara's heart disoriented. She questioned every word she had spoken, every smile she had shared. The absence became a void she could not fill, a weight she could not lift. This is the universal experience of being left without explanation. The world continues, but your heart is suspended in stillness. The psychological impact of sudden abandonment. Humans are wired for connection. When that connection is severed abruptly, it triggers deep psychological responses. Anxiety flares. As the mind searches for patterns, reasons, or solutions, self-doubt takes root, whispering that perhaps you were unworthy or inadequate. Obsessive thinking emerges, replaying past interactions, hunting for clues that may never exist. The sudden silence becomes a mirror for your inner insecurities, magnifying fears that had been quietly waiting beneath the surface. Metaphor: a candle snuffed out. Imagine a candle burning steadily in the dark, providing warmth and light. Suddenly the flame is extinguished without warning. The darkness returns, sharp and cold. The flame is not just the person who left. It is the sense of security, trust, and mutual presence. Its absence leaves a vacuum, exposing the cold edges of reality, where uncertainty and loneliness seep in. Your mind reaches for the flame, but it is gone. And in that absence, you confront both the fragility of external connections and the resilience of your own inner fire. Story: Ethan and the disappearing partner. Ethan had been building a life with someone he trusted deeply. Their conversations were daily rituals, their laughter shared and familiar. Then, without explanation, his partner stopped responding. At first, Ethan tried to rationalize. Maybe they are busy. Maybe they will call. But days became weeks, and weeks became a chasm of silence. Ethan felt the slow erosion of certainty, the creeping shadows of doubt. He realized that the sudden silence was not merely an absence. It was a challenge to his sense of stability, forcing him to confront what it meant to rely on someone else and what it meant to rely on himself. Emotional turbulence. Grief, anger, confusion, sudden abandonment triggers a whirlwind of emotion. Grief for what was lost, anger at the perceived injustice or cruelty, confusion about the why that may never be revealed. These feelings are not weaknesses. They are the natural response of a heart attempting to process sudden absence. The challenge is not to suppress them, but to allow them to surface, to feel fully, and to recognize that your response is valid. Story: Lila learns to sit with the silence. Lila's father disappeared from her life one day, leaving no explanation. For years, she oscillated between hope and despair, seeking answers that never came. Her therapist encouraged her to sit with the silence, to name her feelings, to acknowledge the hurt without judgment. Slowly, Lila began to understand that the absence was not a reflection of her worth. It was a reflection of choices outside her control. This realization did not erase the pain, but it allowed space for reflection and healing. The silence, once sharp and unrelenting, became a doorway to understanding rather than a prison. Understanding hidden truths behind silence. The people who leave without explanation are not always acting out of malice. Silence can hide fear of confrontation, emotional immaturity or inability to communicate, personal struggles unrelated to you. Acknowledging this does not erase the pain, but it shifts the perspective. The sudden absence is not proof of your inadequacy, but a mirror of their limitations, fears, or choices. Metaphor: the locked door picture, a door slamming shut in front of you. At first, it feels like rejection, finality, impossibility. But beyond that door, there may be reasons you cannot see. A room of unresolved issues, fears, or obstacles that have nothing to do with your value. The door is closed, yes, but it is not a measure of your worth. Your job is not to batter the door down, but to cultivate your own space of warmth, presence, and light, while recognizing that doors can close and open in ways you cannot predict. The longing for answers. Humans seek closure, explanations, and narratives that make sense. When silence interrupts, the mind resists ambiguity. We analyze every interaction. We replay every conversation. We imagine outcomes that may never exist. This is natural, but the key is to balance curiosity with self-compassion, to acknowledge the longing without letting it consume your sense of self. Story: Jonas navigates the void. Jonas was left abruptly by a close friend. His mind became a loop of unanswered questions, imagined betrayals, and imagined justifications. Through meditation and journaling, Jonas learned to name his grief and his need for understanding, while also recognizing that some answers may never come. By embracing this balance, he discovered a quiet resilience, a way to hold his heart with care even in the absence of external explanation. Building inner strength. Amid silence, sudden abandonment is a harsh teacher. It forces you to confront your inner world, your vulnerabilities, and your capacity for resilience. Your heart learns to exist without constant external validation. Your mind learns to tolerate uncertainty. Your spirit learns to hold steady even when the world shifts unpredictably. This is the first step toward empowerment, recognizing that while you cannot control others, you can nurture your own capacity for healing, reflection, and presence. Closing reflection. The sudden silence, the slammed door, the absence without explanation. These are experiences that leave scars, but they also leave lessons. They remind you that you are human, capable of connection and of pain, that your heart is strong, even when it trembles, that life's unpredictability can be met with awareness and self-compassion. While the questions may remain and the absence may linger, you are not defined by what others leave behind. You are defined by how you hold your heart in the quiet, by how you cultivate your inner light when the world turns dark. When someone leaves without explanation, your mind searches for meaning. It grasps at fragments, replays conversations, and invents reasons to fill the void. You wonder, did I do something wrong? Did I misread their intentions? Was it always going to end this way? The truth is, the reasons they leave are rarely about you. Often they hide motives that are difficult to face. Fear, avoidance, self-preservation. And understanding these hidden truths doesn't make the hurt vanish, but it does illuminate a path through it. Fear of confrontation. One of the most common reasons people disappear is fear. Fear of confrontation. Fear of emotional intensity. Fear of hurting someone while trying to protect themselves. Some people cannot articulate their feelings, so silence becomes the default. Some retreat because conflict triggers panic, guilt, or shame. Some avoid closure because they cannot face the discomfort of difficult conversations. Psychologically, avoidance is a coping mechanism. It is not always cruel. It is often the product of unresolved emotional patterns, past trauma, or low emotional regulation. Story: Clara's friend, who vanished. Clara's closest friend suddenly stopped responding. No messages, no calls, no explanation. Initially, Clara blamed herself, wondering what she had done wrong. Later, she learned through mutual acquaintances that her friend had a history of avoiding conflict. Every time a difficult conversation arose, this friend retreated, often leaving relationships suspended in silence. It was not personal. It was a reflection of her friend's internal struggle, a fear so potent it eclipsed the capacity for honest communication. Emotional avoidance beyond fear. Emotional avoidance is a deeper, more insidious reason people disappear. Some people are uncomfortable with vulnerability. They cannot process feelings of guilt, regret, or sadness. They leave to protect themselves from emotional overwhelm. They leave to avoid experiencing the intensity of someone else's pain. They leave to maintain a sense of control over situations they cannot manage. From a psychological perspective, avoidance is a learned response often rooted in childhood experiences, attachment patterns, and prior relational trauma. It is a defense mechanism that may feel necessary for them, but devastating for those left behind. Metaphor: the shielded sparrow. Imagine a small bird that senses danger and instinctively retreats into a hidden crevice. Its instinct is to protect itself, to avoid harm. The bird's retreat is survival. But for the observer, the sudden disappearance feels like rejection. The bird's fear is not a reflection of your worth. It is a reflection of its own fragility and need for safety. Similarly, people who disappear without closure often operate from the need to protect their emotional selves, even if it leaves others in pain. Story: Daniel and the partner. Who left Daniel's partner disappeared after months of relationship struggles. No explanations, no goodbye, just absence. At first, Daniel assumed betrayal, deception, or indifference. But in time, he discovered that his partner's avoidance was tied to unresolved childhood wounds, an inability to process conflict, an instinct to flee from emotional intensity. Understanding this did not erase the pain, but it reframed the experience. Daniel realized it was not about him. It was about the partner's internal limitations, self-preservation, and ego sometimes. Departure is a tool of self-preservation or ego maintenance. People leave relationships to avoid feeling inadequate or guilty, protect their sense of identity from perceived demands, escape situations where compromise or accountability is required. From the outside, this may seem cold or uncaring, but internally, it is a defense mechanism, an attempt to preserve emotional stability. However flawed the method, psychological patterns of departures. Research in attachment theory and relational psychology shows common patterns. Avoidant attachment. Individuals with avoidant attachment often struggle with intimacy and withdraw when emotional intensity rises. Fear-based response. Trauma histories can trigger flight responses when vulnerability is required. Projection of guilt. Leaving can be a way to avoid confronting personal responsibility or fear of hurting someone else. Emotional burnout. Chronic stress or overexposure to relational demands can push someone to disappear abruptly. These patterns are rarely malicious. They are human responses to internal struggles, often enacted unconsciously. Metaphor. Walking on ice. Think of someone navigating thin ice. Every step feels precarious. Every movement risks exposure, collapse, or loss of balance. Sometimes, rather than face the instability, the person steps away entirely, leaving others stranded on solid ground. Their departure is not a statement about your stability or worth. It is a reflection of their own insecurity, fear, and need for safety. Story. Naomi learns. The roots of absence. Naomi was left by a co-worker she considered a close friend. Initially, Naomi ruminated endlessly, blaming herself. But over time, she observed patterns. This co-worker had a history of abruptly leaving relationships and projects, avoiding confrontation whenever stress rose. Naomi realized the absence was about the co-worker's coping style, not a reflection of her value. This understanding allowed Naomi to release some of her guilt and begin rebuilding trust in herself. The unsettling. Truth understanding the hidden psychology of departure is unsettling because it challenges the narratives we build about relationships. We want closure, clarity, and explanation. We want to believe that silence is intentional rejection or malice, but often the truth is more complex. Fear drives disappearance. Emotional avoidance drives disappearance. Self-preservation drives disappearance. The unsettling part? None of these reasons require your consent or understanding. They happen in parallel to your experience, leaving you to process the consequences. Story. Alex confronts the void. Alex's long-term friend vanished without warning. Weeks passed in silence. Alex was consumed by self-questioning until a mutual acquaintance revealed the friend's chronic avoidance patterns. The knowledge was both comforting and disorienting. It explained nothing of the personal loss, yet it illuminated that the absence had nothing to do with Alex's worth. From that realization, Alex began to reclaim emotional grounding, understanding that while some doors close without explanation, the meaning lies not in the act of departure, but in how we respond internally. Psychological lessons from sudden absence. It is not about you. Departures often reflect internal struggles in the other person, not deficiencies in your character. Understanding is healing. Recognizing patterns of fear and avoidance allows you to contextualize pain. Boundaries. Protect you. Knowledge of common departure motives empowers you to set limits without resentment. Emotional. Self-reliance. Awareness fosters resilience and prevents the mind from spiraling endlessly in search of answers. Psychology teaches that insight into others' motives does not erase pain, but it mitigates its corrosive effects on your sense of self. Metaphor. The lighthouse. Consider yourself a lighthouse on a rocky shore. Others may drift past, lost in storms or blinded by fog. Some ships pass safely. Others vanish without explanation. Your purpose is not to control their navigation, but to remain steadfast, illuminating your own truth. Understanding the hidden psychology of departure is like reading the currents. You cannot control the sea, but you can anchor yourself firmly on the shore. Closing reflection. Departures without explanation leave a void, but within that void is the seed of insight. People leave for reasons tied to fear, avoidance, and self-preservation. Their silence often reflects their internal struggles, not your inadequacy. Recognizing these truths allows you to separate your self-worth from their choices. This knowledge shifts your perspective, not immediately, but gradually. It plants the first seeds of clarity, resilience, and emotional sovereignty. But knowing why they left is only half the story. What happens inside you? The storm of thoughts, the emotional hunger, the self-doubt is even more revealing. And in the next section, we will explore that inner turbulence, uncovering how sudden absence shapes the mind and spirit, often in ways you never expected. You thought it was just a moment, a call unanswered, a presence gone. But in that silence, a storm begins to form inside. It is subtle at first, almost imperceptible, a question here, a doubt there. But gradually, it grows, whispering louder with each passing day. What did I do? Why wasn't I enough? Abandonment does not simply leave an empty space outside. It seeps into the interior, quietly reshaping the way you see yourself, the world, and the fragile connections you crave. The birth of self-doubt. When someone vanishes without explanation, self-doubt becomes an automatic companion. Every memory of shared laughter is questioned. Every compliment, every gesture, every word you once believed becomes suspect. You start second-guessing your own worth, your instincts, your value. Your mind becomes a courtroom where you are both the accused and the judge. Every silence becomes evidence of inadequacy, and in the echo chamber of your thoughts, you begin to believe the verdict. Story: Mia's endless replays. Mia's partner disappeared without warning. She spent hours replaying conversations, analyzing every smile, every sigh. Was it something she said? Was it something she didn't do? Did she misread their intentions? The more Mia examined the past, the more elusive clarity became. Her self-doubt fed on the absence, creating an internal loop that seemed impossible to break. Obsessive thinking and mental spirals. The mind, craving closure, often spirals when left with unanswered questions. You invent scenarios that may never have happened. You assign motives and intentions that may not exist. You dwell on what-ifs, creating endless permutations of imagined failure. This obsessive thinking is a psychological response to uncertainty. The brain hates ambiguity, so it fills the void, even if the narrative it constructs is harsher than reality. Metaphor: a heart starving for light. Imagine a small plant in a dark room. It bends toward any sliver of light, stretching desperately to survive. Your heart, left in the void of abandonment, is much like that plant, reaching, straining, seeking connection and reassurance, even when none is coming. Every unanswered message, every vanished presence, every silence is a shadow against which the heart longs for illumination. And yet, in that darkness, the plant, the heart, learns resilience, even if it does not yet see the sun. Guilt and the weight of responsibility. Internal fallout often manifests as misplaced guilt. If only I had tried harder. If only I had been more attentive. If only I had said the right words at the right time. You begin to carry burdens that were never yours to bear. Your mind rewrites the narrative, casting you as the cause of the departure, when in truth, the reasons often lie entirely with the other person. Story: Liam and the ghosted friend. Liam's closest friend stopped returning calls. At first, Liam rationalized, they must be busy. Weeks later, he began to feel a deep, gnawing responsibility. Did I say something wrong? Did I fail them somehow? Even after learning that his friend had a history of withdrawing during stress, Liam realized the self-imposed guilt lingered. The internal fallout of abandonment is not just sadness. It is a persistent questioning of your own value and actions. Emotional hunger and craving. Abandonment triggers an emotional hunger, a craving for reassurance, for explanation, for connection. You long to hear the words you will never hear. You seek signals that may never come. You hope for a resolution that may never exist. This hunger can dominate thoughts, affect sleep, and influence behavior. It is a deep ache, an invisible wound that compels the heart to reach outward while the mind struggles inward. Metaphor: the ocean of unanswered questions. Picture standing on the shore of a vast ocean. Each wave is a question, each tide a memory, each ripple an imagined scenario. Some waves crash and retreat, some pull you under, overwhelming your strength. The ocean never stops moving, and yet the horizon never reveals clarity. Your mind, like that ocean, churns endlessly in search of closure, and until you learn to navigate it, the waves continue to erode your sense of stability and self. The danger of overthinking. Left unchecked, overthinking becomes corrosive. It magnifies insecurities. It distorts perception. It erodes confidence in decisions, relationships, and your own judgment. The more you obsess, the more you create a narrative in which you are at fault, powerless, or unworthy. This is not truth. It is the mind's attempt to impose order on chaos, even at the cost of your own peace. Story: Sophia's struggle with silence. Sophia's colleague withdrew suddenly after weeks of collaboration. Initially, Sophia tried to rationalize and move on, but soon she found herself replaying every meeting, analyzing every word, every glance, trying to understand the absence. Her self-worth eroded as she imagined failure at every turn. It was only through conscious reflection and journaling that Sophia recognized the destructive pattern. The absence was not a mirror of her competence or value. It was the other person's unresolved patterns in motion, the spiritual weight of abandonment for those who seek meaning in faith or higher purpose. Abandonment can feel like a spiritual trial. Why would God allow this? Why am I left alone? Am I unworthy of love or care? These questions add an existential layer to the internal fallout. They challenge not only self-perception, but also belief in justice, kindness, or divine attention. Yet even here, there is potential growth. Confronting these spiritual doubts forces reflection on resilience, trust, and the capacity to find meaning within suffering. Metaphor: a ship in a storm. Imagine a ship tossed by relentless waves. The storm is not a choice. It is imposed from outside. You cannot control the winds nor calm the sea. All you can do is navigate with skill, patience, and awareness. Abandonment is that storm. You are the ship. The waves of doubt, self-questioning, and emotional hunger crash over you, but they do not have to define your course. Awareness, self-compassion, and reflection are the rudder that can guide you toward calmer waters. The slow corrosion of self-internal fallout is not always explosive. It can be subtle, a slow erosion of confidence and trust. You hesitate in future relationships. You fear being too open or vulnerable. You anticipate rejection before it arrives. Left unresolved, these patterns shape your choices, interactions, and even your sense of identity. The wound of sudden absence is not just emotional. It becomes a blueprint for avoidance, self-protection, and guardedness. Story: Jordan learns to witness. His pain: Jordan was abandoned by a long-term partner with no explanation. He found himself second-guessing every future interaction, hesitant to trust, and constantly craving reassurance. Through mindfulness and therapy, Jordan began to observe his thoughts without judgment. He learned that self-doubt and obsessive thinking were not truths. They were echoes of loss. This witnessing created space for healing, even as the emotional wound remained tender. The path to awareness. First step in mitigating the internal fallout is awareness. Recognize obsessive thought, patterns. Name self-critical narratives as they arise. Separate the absence from your self-worth. Acknowledge the emotional hunger without letting it dictate behavior. By observing the mind rather than being consumed by it, you reclaim agency over your inner world, even while the external world remains unpredictable. Metaphor: the garden. After the fire, think of your inner self as a garden that has been scorched by sudden fire. The flames leave blackened soil, but they also clear space for renewal. New seeds can be planted. Stronger roots can grow. The garden becomes resilient, capable of withstanding future storms. Your soul, wounded by abandonment, is that garden. The internal fallout is the clearing, painful though it is. Reflection, self-compassion, and conscious healing are the tools to cultivate new growth. Closing reflection: abandonment wounds the soul in ways both visible and hidden. It triggers self-doubt that questions your value, obsessive thinking that traps you in endless cycles, emotional hunger that cannot be satisfied by absence. Yet recognizing this fallout is the first step toward healing. Awareness allows you to name the storm, witness its patterns, and prevent it from dictating the trajectory of your heart and mind. You are not powerless in the face of silence. You are capable of holding your own worth, nurturing your emotional resilience, and preparing for the eventual restoration of connection and trust. There comes a moment when silence stops being an absence and becomes a weight. It presses against your chest, anchors your thoughts, and seeps into your bones. Every unanswered message, every vanished presence, every question that lingers without reply begins to feel like a verdict. You are invisible. You are not enough. You do not matter. This is the breaking point. It is the intersection of sorrow, confusion, and raw longing, where the mind churns and the heart aches with a force you did not know it could bear. Sleepless nights and haunting memories. One of the first signs of collapse is the inability to rest. Sleep becomes a battlefield. You wake in the middle of the night, haunted by imagined conversations. You replay every interaction, every gesture, every word, dissecting for hidden meanings. The absence of closure grows louder than any lullaby or comfort. Your memory, once a companion, becomes a relentless tormentor. Images of their face, their voice, their presence haunt your waking and sleeping hours. Even the familiar corners of your life feel hollow, shadows of what was and what might have been. Story: Eleanor and the Midnight Vigil. Alina's partner disappeared without explanation. Every night she sat by her phone, hoping for a message, a call, any sign that the connection still existed. Her mind replayed arguments she never had, apologies she never gave, and moments she misremembered. Sleep eluded her. Meals became mechanical. Conversations felt distant and muted. At the breaking point, Elena realized that the absence had taken more than just a relationship. It had begun to erode her very sense of safety and stability, the emotional avalanche. When abandonment lingers without explanation, emotions pile up in layers. Grief for what was lost, for the person who vanished, for the moments that will never return. Anger at the injustice, the unfairness, the lack of respect or clarity. Confusion, wondering what went wrong, what could have been done differently, what is truly true. Despair, when questions go unanswered and hope fades. This avalanche is exhausting. Each emotion triggers another, creating a relentless cycle that clouds judgment, drains energy, and makes ordinary life feel monumental. Metaphor: the house on fire. Imagine standing in a home engulfed in flames. Every familiar room is ablaze, every window obscured by smoke. You cannot see a way out, and every instinct screams urgency while panic blurs clarity. This is what internal collapse feels like. Abandonment without closure is that fire. The familiar structure of your emotional life burns, leaving only ash, smoke, and the desperate need for air, for safety, for understanding, haunting questions, and spiritual despair. The human heart craves meaning. When someone leaves abruptly, unanswered questions pile on. Why did they go? Was I not enough? Did I fail in ways I cannot see? Does anyone care if I'm hurt? For those with spiritual sensibilities, this can intensify into profound despair. Why would God allow this pain? Why do the faithful suffer? Is my love unworthy or meaningless? These questions do not come softly. They arrive as thunderclaps, shaking the foundations of belief, hope, and trust in the world. Story: Marcus and the vanishing mentor. Marcus's mentor, a guide and father figure, abruptly withdrew from his life. No explanation, no conversation, only absence. Marcus struggled with faith, wondering if his own devotion and loyalty meant nothing. Every prayer seemed unanswered. Every meditation felt hollow. His spiritual center, once steady, trembled under the weight of silence. This is the hidden cruelty of sudden departure. It fractures not only relationships, but also the framework through which we understand love, meaning, and connection. Psychological dimensions of collapse. From a psychological standpoint, abrupt absence triggers attachment trauma. Early experiences of unpredictability or abandonment resurface, magnifying pain, rumination, constant mental replaying of events without resolution, eroding emotional energy. Loss of control, feeling powerless, fuels anxiety, despair, and helplessness. Existential crisis. Questions of value, purpose, and meaning intensify under the weight of unanswered silence. Each of these factors compounds the emotional impact, creating a perfect storm where clarity and calm feel impossible. Metaphor: the ocean consuming the shore. Consider a shoreline pounded by relentless waves. Each wave pulls sand into the sea, reshaping the landscape without warning. Your heart is the shore. Abandonment is the ocean. Each unanswered question, each sudden silence, each vanished presence erodes the familiar contours of trust, security, and certainty. Over time, the shoreline disappears, leaving only the raw, exposed ground beneath. Story. Lila and the vanishing love Lila's partner left without reason or goodbye. At first, she tried to rationalize. They must be busy. Maybe they need space. Weeks turned into months. The absence carved deep trenches of doubt and longing in her psyche. She experienced sleepless nights, filled with imagined confrontations, obsessive monitoring of social media for signs, emotional swings from hope to despair in minutes eventually. Lila realized that the absence had become more than external. It was internalized, shaping her self-perception, her expectations of love, and her ability to trust. The physical toll of emotional collapse is not just emotional, it is physical. Sleep deprivation weakens cognition and decision-making. Appetite changes disrupt energy and mood. Chronic stress activates fight or flight responses, keeping the body in tension. Emotional pain triggers the same neural pathways as physical pain, making the heartache literal. In other words, when closure feels impossible, your body becomes a mirror of your soul's turmoil. The mind, heart, and body are all entangled in the fallout of absence. Metaphor. A candle burning at both ends. Think of a candle lit at both ends. The flame is bright but short-lived. Every second consumes more wax, more energy, until the candle collapses into darkness. In the same way, the heart overextends itself, replaying memories, seeking answers, and trying to reconcile absence. Eventually, exhaustion sets in, leaving only the stark awareness of what has been lost. Story. Nathan's collapse of certainty. Nathan's closest friend disappeared after years of trust and companionship. Nathan's mental state deteriorated. He questioned every friendship he had. He doubted his ability to form lasting connections. He feared being abandoned again, preemptively withdrawing from those he cared about. The breaking point was not just sorrow, it was a reshaping of identity. The absence forced him to confront the fragility of attachment and the impermanence of perceived security. Spiritual reflection in darkness. Even amidst collapse, there is a subtle invitation to witness pain without being consumed by it. Darkness forces reflection on what matters. Absence teaches the limits of control. Spiritual introspection can illuminate resilience, patience, and the hidden strengths of a heart that endures. This is not consolation, it is recognition. Collapse is painful, but it is also a mirror showing the boundaries between what we can control and what we cannot. Metaphor. The storm. Before dawn, every storm reaches a point where it is impossible to measure the wind, impossible to gauge the rain, impossible to see the horizon. But storms do pass. And in the calm that follows, the first glimmers of dawn reveal what survived. The sturdy tree, the unmoved rock, the ground ready to nurture new growth. Collapse is the storm. Your soul is the tree, the rock, the soil. And even here, in the darkest hours, seeds of understanding, resilience, and eventual healing are already taking root. Psychological insight. What breakage reveals collapse reveals truths that are often ignored. The depth of attachment, showing how much we care and what relationships truly mean. The fragility of reliance, revealing where dependence has become disproportionate. The strength of endurance, the fact that even in despair, you continue to breathe, to think, to feel, the opportunity for growth. Awareness born from suffering is the precursor to change and resilience. Understanding. The breaking point is not about glamorizing pain. It is about acknowledging its purpose, its lessons, and its potential for transformation. Story. Isabel finds the first glimmer. Isabel's partner left abruptly, leaving her in a state of despair. Nights were sleepless, days hollow. Every thought returned to absence, every memory became a chain. But gradually, she noticed small shifts. She could endure a day without checking messages. She could reflect on her own emotions without judgment. She began to observe patterns rather than being consumed by them. In this fragile observation, Isabel glimpsed the first glimmer of healing, a hint that even in collapse, awareness could exist. The breaking point is terrifying because it strips away all certainty, emotional, relational, and spiritual. It exposes raw nerves, haunting questions, and the fragility of trust. Yet it is in this darkness that clarity begins. Awareness, reflection, and resilience are born not from comfort, but from endurance. The mind, the heart, and the spirit, though battered, remain capable of recovery. And yet strangely, within this collapse lies the first glimmer of understanding and healing. Even in despair, there is a whisper of insight, a thread of awareness that points toward growth. In the next section, we will explore how these seeds emerge from the wreckage, taking form in stories that mirror our own pain and hint at the possibility of renewal. Sometimes, the most shattering absence is not the absence of strangers, but of those who were once closest. The partner who leaves without explanation, the friend who vanishes in the middle of your laughter, the mentor who disappears just when guidance seemed certain. Each departure feels like a personal failure, but often the silence tells more about them than it ever does about you. These are the faces behind the silence, and by walking through their stories, we begin to understand both the pain and the truth. Absence is rarely random. Story 1. The partner who left without goodbye. Sophia had believed in love with every fiber of her being. She and her partner shared routines, laughter, dreams, until one morning they didn't. No calls, no messages, no explanation. Sophia's mind replayed every conversation, every argument, every smile. She questioned her worth, her choices, even her capacity to be loved. Friends told her to let go, but the lack of closure felt like a rope tethered to a cliff, dangling her over emptiness. Later, Sophia learned the truth. Her partner's departure had little to do with her. Their fear of confrontation, their inability to face emotional intimacy, had driven them away. The silence was theirs, not hers. A reflection of their inner limitations, not her value. Through Sophia, we see the first lesson. Absence is often a mirror, not a judgment. Story 2. The friend who vanished. Liam had a circle of friends he believed unshakable. One evening, a close friend stopped returning messages. At first, Liam thought it was busyness, oversight. But days became weeks. Weeks became months. Liam experienced waves of doubt. Had he said something wrong? Was he too much or too little? He feared reaching out, worried his presence would push them further away. At night, he wondered if the friendship had ever truly existed. The revelation came slowly. His friend had patterns of withdrawal, emotional avoidance, and fear of vulnerability. Their departure was not a verdict on Liam's worth. It was their own struggle projected outward. Here, we learn the second truth. Silence often reveals the inner battles of others more than the failings of ourselves. Story 3. The mentor. Who withdrew Marcus's mentor had been a guide, a father figure, and a source of wisdom during formative years. Then, without warning, the mentor disappeared. No calls, no messages, no explanation. Marcus felt abandoned at a pivotal moment in his life. He questioned every decision, every instinct, every future step. His spiritual center, once solid, trembled under the weight of unanswered questions. Later, Marcus understood. The mentor's withdrawal was tied to their own unresolved issues, stress, personal crises, fear of over-attachment. The absence was not rejection. It was self-preservation. Through Marcus, we see that those who leave often do so from a place of limitation, not malice. Metaphor. Shadows of departure. Imagine a room where the lights suddenly go out. The shadows stretch long and unfamiliar, and every corner feels threatening. But shadows, by definition, are cast by something else. They do not exist independently. The people who vanish are the source of the shadow. Their absence stretches across your life, but it is not a mark on you. It is a reflection of their own struggles, fears, and imperfections. Recognizing this is the first step toward releasing misplaced blame. Story 4. The colleague who disappeared. Lila had a co-worker she relied on for collaboration and support. One day her emails went unanswered. Meetings were missed. Work that was once shared became solitary. Lila felt frustration, anxiety, and insecurity creeping in. She questioned her professional worth and her ability to foster meaningful connections. Eventually, she discovered that the colleague had personal issues, burnout, stress, and avoidance of responsibility. Lila's perceived rejection was a mirror of their internal struggle, not a reflection of her competence or value. Through this, we learn that absence often exposes the inner battles of others, offering insight rather than judgment. The emotional pattern behind departures. As we trace these stories, patterns emerge. Fear of intimacy. Many departures stem from discomfort with closeness or vulnerability. Avoidance of conflict. Silence is often easier than confrontation. Self-preservation. Sometimes, leaving is a defense mechanism, a way to protect one's own emotional stability. Projection. Those who leave may project their own insecurities onto others, leaving absence as a shield. These patterns do not justify pain, but they illuminate the truth. Absence is rarely a verdict on the person left behind. Story 5. A parent who withdrew. Isabel's father had been emotionally present in small ways, but distant in others. Then during her adolescence, he withdrew completely. Absent from school events, silent at milestones, unavailable in moments of need. Isabel internalized the absence, believing she was unworthy of love and attention. For years, she replayed interactions, sought approval, and feared abandonment in all relationships. Only later did Isabel understand. Her father's absence reflected his unresolved trauma, his emotional limitations, and his inability to engage rather than her inadequacy. This story teaches that even lifelong relationships are shaped by the inner struggles of others, not the deficiencies of ourselves. Metaphor. The river that shifts. Think of a river that suddenly changes course. The water no longer flows where you expect. The landscape you knew feels unfamiliar. People who leave abruptly are like that river. Their paths shift, leaving the land of your life changed, sometimes scarred. But rivers also carve fertile valleys. Their absence, while painful, can create space for growth, reflection, and resilience. Story 6. The romantic relationship that ended abruptly. Jordan's relationship ended without warning. One day, everything felt normal. The next, the partner was gone, leaving no explanation. Jordan felt devastated, questioning his ability to be loved. The absence echoed through every aspect of his life, creating uncertainty and despair. Time revealed the partner's own unresolved emotional patterns, fear of commitment, avoidance of discomfort, and internal chaos. Jordan's pain was real, but it was not a reflection of his worth or his love. Through this, we see that departures are often windows into another's struggles, not indictments of ourselves. The universal pattern across these narratives, the lessons converge. Silence rarely equals malice, it often equals limitation. Absence speaks more about the leaver than the left behind. Understanding motives does not erase pain, but reframes it. Awareness of these patterns can prevent internalizing abandonment as a personal failing. These truths are subtle, easily overlooked in the raw moments of hurt, but recognizing them begins the process of reclaiming emotional stability. Story 7. The friend who returned. Sometimes absence is temporary. Mia's childhood friend vanished for a year due to personal struggles. When they returned, Mia realized that the absence had been a reflection of the friend's internal turmoil, not a lack of care. Mia's perspective shifted. She learned patience, compassion, and the importance of boundaries. The friend's return was a reminder that departures, while painful, can coexist with growth and understanding. Here, the narrative teaches that absence can be a teacher, revealing patterns, limits, and the potential for future connection. Story 8. The Mentor Who Reappeared. After months of silence, Marcus's mentor reached out, explaining the reasons for withdrawal, personal crises, fear of over-attachment, and inability to manage emotional responsibility. Marcus felt relief, but more importantly, he felt insight. He recognized that the mentor's absence was not rejection. It was self-preservation and human limitation. This story highlights that understanding departures, even belatedly, can transform pain into wisdom and insight. Metaphor: the forest. After a fire, imagine a forest scorched by fire. Initially, it seems barren, desolate, and hopeless. Yet, over time, new growth emerges from the soil. Stronger, more resilient trees take root. The forest becomes a richer ecosystem than before. Departures are the fire. The emotional landscape feels destroyed. But from that absence, resilience, insight, and emotional maturity can emerge. Closing reflection. Each story shows a truth. The silence that haunts is rarely a reflection of your inadequacy. It is often a reflection of another's limitations, fears, and struggles. By seeing these stories, we can separate self-worth from absence. Understand that departures, while painful, reveal patterns in others rather than failures in ourselves. Begin to reclaim perspective and emotional agency. These stories do not erase the pain. They honor it, give it shape, and allow it to teach us about human complexity, impermanence, and the subtle lessons embedded in loss. There comes a moment when the chaos of unanswered calls, vanished presence, and relentless questions begins to settle. The storm of pain does not vanish overnight, but clarity begins to emerge. This is the turning point, the instant you realize that their exit says far more about them than it does about you. Until now, the mind has replayed every interaction, every smile, every conversation, asking the impossible: why did they leave? What did I do wrong? Could I have prevented this? And yet, the truth is startling in its simplicity. Closure is rarely theirs to give. Understanding does not always require explanation. Peace begins with recognition, not justification. The moment you realize, imagine lying awake after weeks, months, or years of turmoil. The questions still echo, but a faint whisper begins. Perhaps their departure was never about me. Perhaps their silence reveals their own fears, limitations, or inability to cope with intimacy. Perhaps my worth is intact, even if their presence is gone. It is the first fragile breath of awakening, a gentle flicker in the darkness. Story: Eleanor and the letter she never received. Elena's partner left abruptly. For months, she imagined confrontations, explanations, and apologies that would never come. Each day felt like a battle against her own mind, replaying scenarios, dissecting past words, chasing closure that would never arrive. One evening, exhausted, she reflected, what if I stopped chasing answers that are not mine to find? In that instant, the first shift occurred. The pain did not vanish, but the narrative changed. The absence was a reflection of the other person's limitations, not a verdict on her love, her effort, or her worth. Elena's turning point was subtle, almost imperceptible, but profound. Understanding that clarity is an internal act, not dependent on the actions of others, recognizing patterns in departure. The stories we have lived or witnessed are rarely isolated. Abrupt exits, silent withdrawals, and vanishing presences share patterns. Fear of confrontation. People avoid conflict by leaving. Silently, emotional avoidance. They cannot face vulnerability and instead retreat, self-protection. Departures are often a shield against their own discomfort. Projection of insecurities. Absence reflects unresolved inner struggles. Seeing these patterns allows us to stop internalizing their actions. We begin to recognize their choices were about their limitations, not your inadequacy. Metaphor. The mirror and the window. Think of their exit as both a mirror and a window. The mirror shows how deeply you love, how much you invest, and how committed you are to connection. It reflects your capacity, not your failure. The window offers insight into their inner world, revealing fears, avoidance, and limitations that were always theirs to manage. By observing both, you reclaim perspective. You see yourself with compassion and them with understanding, without condoning the pain they caused. Story: Marcus and the mentor. Who disappeared, Marcus's mentor had withdrawn unexpectedly, leaving him adrift in doubt and uncertainty. For weeks, he replayed memories, wondering if his loyalty, effort, or respect had fallen short. The turning point came when Marcus realized this absence reflects their own unresolved issues, not my deficiencies. With this recognition, the weight lifted slightly. He still felt the sting, but he no longer carried the burden of responsibility for another's choices. Peace began to seep into the cracks that despair had carved. The cognitive shift. Acceptance. Without condemnation, acceptance does not mean approval of abandonment. It does not erase the pain or the loss. It is a deliberate act of self-liberation. Acknowledging reality, seeing the truth without distortion, separating self from action, understanding that another's choices do not define your value, releasing the illusion of control, recognizing that closure often cannot be granted externally. This cognitive shift is subtle but transformative. It changes the internal dialogue from "I am abandoned," "I am rejected," "I am unworthy" to "They have left. Their absence is their choice. My value remains." Story: Lila and the friend. Who vanished? Lila's friend disappeared suddenly. She oscillated between hope, despair, and anger. One day, reflecting on patterns she had noticed in others, she realized her friend had a history of withdrawal. Their silence was part of a larger pattern, not a statement about Lila's worth. She could observe, not internalize, their actions. With this understanding, Lila experienced a gentle relief. She was still hurt, but she was no longer a captive of confusion. She had glimpsed the first light of agency, the power to reclaim her emotional center. Emotional liberation through insight. The turning point brings subtle yet profound freedom. Your heart can grieve without shame. Your mind can reflect without obsession. Your spirit can remain whole even when others falter. This liberation is not instantaneous. It is a process, a series of quiet acknowledgments, each one loosening the chains that absence has wrapped around your emotional life. Story: Nathan and the romantic disappearance. Nathan's partner disappeared without explanation. Nights were sleepless. Days were heavy. Every interaction was dissected, every memory questioned. The turning point arrived unexpectedly during a moment of quiet. He realized that he had been seeking closure from someone who could not give it. The understanding was simple. Their exit was their story, not his. Nathan's grief did not vanish, but it began to shift. He grieved for the relationship, not his self-worth. He mourned the absence, not his capacity to love. He began to notice opportunities for self-compassion and reflection. This is the subtle power of the turning point. It reframes grief without negating it, creating space for emotional resilience. Metaphor: the dawn. After the longest night, imagine a night so dark that the stars are hidden and the horizon is impossible to see. Every sound is magnified, every shadow threatens, and hope feels distant. Then, gradually, faint light appears. Not blinding, not sudden, just a gentle glow over the edge of the world. The turning point is that first light. It does not erase the night, but it signals that dawn is possible. That light is awareness, the recognition that absence often reflects the limitations of others, not your inadequacy. Recognizing your own strength, awakening to this truth also reveals hidden strengths. Resilience, you have endured pain and confusion and survived. Discernment, you can recognize patterns and see beyond the surface of others' actions. Agency, you can choose how to respond, where to invest, and when to let go. Compassion, you can extend understanding to yourself and even to those who hurt you without condoning the harm. These strengths were present all along. The turning point simply allows you to see them. Story: Isabel and the parent who withdrew. Isabel's father had emotionally withdrawn during her adolescence. For years she internalized the absence, blaming herself. The awakening came gradually as she reflected on his history, his limitations, and the patterns of his own upbringing. She realized his withdrawal was not a statement about her worth. She had the capacity to love, to trust, and to build connections independently of his presence. Acceptance did not erase the hurt, but transformed it into understanding. This reflection marks a critical shift: emotional autonomy and the reclamation of peace. Practical steps toward acceptance. While insight is powerful, it can be reinforced through intentional practice, internal dialogue shift. Replace self-blame with recognition of another's limitations. Mindful reflection. Observe your feelings without judgment, letting awareness guide your response. Boundary reinforcement. Accept what is outside your control. Protect your emotional space. Reconnection with self. Invest in your own values, passions, and support systems. These actions transform awakening from a cognitive insight into a lived experience of peace and agency. Story: Mia and the temporarily absent friend Mia's friend vanished for a year. Initially, she blamed herself, replayed interactions endlessly, and felt unmoored. Through reflection, Mia realized her friend's disappearance reflected personal struggles, not abandonment. She could maintain connection when appropriate without internalizing absence. She had the power to shape her own emotional responses. This insight allowed Mia to reclaim equilibrium, demonstrating that the turning point is both cognitive and emotional. Metaphor: the phoenix rising. The turning point is like the first spark that ignites a phoenix. The bird is scorched, fragile, and battered. Its wings are heavy, its body weary. Yet from the ashes, strength is rekindled, purpose is restored, and flight becomes possible. Similarly, when you recognize the truth behind departures, the ashes of confusion and despair give rise to awareness, resilience, and eventual emotional freedom. The turning point is neither sudden nor dramatic. It is quiet, internal, and profound. It is the realization that closure is often not theirs to grant, that understanding is rarely external, and that acceptance is the first act of reclaiming your own peace. From this awareness, you gain clarity, perspective, and emotional agency. The storm of grief does not vanish, but it no longer dictates your every thought. You are no longer captive to absence. Healing often begins not when the other person explains themselves, but when you stop waiting for explanations altogether. The truth is, you may never hear why they left, why they ghosted, or why they never showed up the way you needed. And yet, your heart can mend, your mind can rest, your soul can find peace. Healing is less about them and more about reclaiming your own space, your own clarity, and your own dignity. This is the gentle power of choosing to heal without their permission, without their justification, and without the closure you longed for. The first step: accepting the unanswerable. Acceptance does not mean condoning the absence or erasing the hurt. It is simply acknowledging reality. They are gone. You may never know why. Your life continues whether or not answers arrive. Imagine holding a heavy stone, pressing it to your chest, demanding it explain itself. The weight does not lighten because of understanding. It lightens when you set it down. Acceptance is setting the stone down, even while your hands tremble. Story: Sophia and the vanished partner. Sophia spent months replaying every conversation, every small disagreement, every smile that might have hinted at the end. She longed for an explanation, a letter, even a single word. One day, exhausted and tear-stained, she realized she could no longer wait. She could not let the absence define her. She began to forgive, not for the partner, but for herself. Release the expectation of closure. Focus on rebuilding her emotional world. Sophia's healing was not dramatic. It was subtle. Each day she reclaimed a small piece of herself. Each step, no matter how tiny, became a brick in the foundation of her renewed emotional life. Boundaries. As healing is impossible without boundaries. Boundaries protect your heart, your energy, and your emotional equilibrium. Emotional boundaries. Do not allow the past absence to dictate your current relationships. Do not internalize blame or guilt. Physical boundaries. Limit contact with those whose absence or inconsistency destabilizes you. Mental boundaries. Stop replaying scenarios endlessly. Redirect thoughts toward growth, self-compassion, and understanding. Boundaries are not walls. They are bridges back to yourself. They are gentle fences that allow your heart to breathe, to expand, and to reconnect safely. Story: Liam and the disappearing friend. Liam's friend vanished for months. At first, he felt powerless, hurt, and anxious. Then, he started implementing boundaries. He reduced mental energy spent analyzing the absence. He limited attempts to reconnect without reciprocity. He invested in relationships that were present, reliable, and nurturing. Gradually, Liam felt strength return. He realized that his worth was independent of anyone else's presence or absence. Boundaries had become his act of self-respect, his first step toward emotional restoration. Forgiveness as liberation. Forgiveness is often misunderstood. It is not forgetting the pain, condoning absence or betrayal, reopening doors prematurely. Forgiveness is a gift you give to yourself. It unchains your heart from resentment, allowing energy to flow back into growth, peace, and self-love. Internal forgiveness. Release the anger that keeps you tethered to their absence. Compassionate understanding. Recognize human limitations, fear and avoidance in others. Self-directed forgiveness. Let go of the guilt, shame, or self-blame that often accompanies abandonment. Metaphor. Healing as gardening. Think of your heart as a garden. Abandonment feels like a storm that uproots seedlings, floods the soil, and leaves debris scattered. Healing without explanation is tending to your garden anyway. Pull weeds of self-blame. Plant seeds of boundaries and self-compassion. Water the soil with forgiveness and reflection. The garden will bloom again, not because the storm apologized, but because you nurtured the space it disturbed. Story: Marcus and the mentorship. That ended. Marcus's mentor disappeared suddenly, leaving him anxious and uncertain. He could not demand explanations, nor could he change the past. Instead, Marcus began to reclaim his own voice and decision-making, reflect on lessons learned rather than the absence itself, create routines and practices that nurtured his emotional resilience. Over time, he felt empowerment grow where despair once resided. Healing without their explanation was not passive. It was deliberate, intentional, and profoundly transformative. Emotional resilience through reflection. Reflection is a powerful tool in healing. It allows you to recognize patterns in relationships, understand what you need to feel safe, valued, and loved. Develop empathy for others without surrendering your own boundaries. By reflecting, you strengthen the emotional muscles needed to navigate life's absences, inconsistencies, and unpredictabilities. Reflection is a quiet teacher, turning pain into wisdom. Story: Elena and the letter. She never received. Elena had longed for closure from a vanished partner. When none came, she turned inward. She journaled her thoughts, acknowledging grief without judgment. She examined the relationship with honesty, identifying both gifts and misalignments. She let go of imagined answers, embracing reality as it was. Through reflection, Elena found peace, not because the partner returned, but because she no longer depended on their presence for understanding or worth. Reconnecting with yourself. Healing without explanation also requires returning to the self. Rediscover passions abandoned during the search for answers. Rebuild routines that nurture your body, mind, and soul. Surround yourself with people who affirm your presence, reliability, and value. Your identity is not defined by absence. Reconnection with self is the foundation upon which all other healing rests. Story: Lila and her vanished friend, Lila's friend, had disappeared for months, leaving her in turmoil. As she healed, she focused on reconnecting with herself. She began to pursue hobbies that gave her joy. She re-established friendships with those who showed presence and care. She cultivated internal dialogue that affirmed her worth regardless of external absence. This self-reconnection allowed her to step forward with confidence, clarity, and resilience. Metaphor: the lighthouse in the storm. Imagine a lighthouse standing amid a violent storm. The waves crash, the wind howls, and the darkness seems endless. The lighthouse does not control the storm. It does not prevent ships from being tossed. Yet it remains, steadfast, illuminating a safe path. Healing without explanation is building that lighthouse within yourself. You cannot control their absence, but you can ensure your own light remains steady, guiding you back to emotional safety and clarity. Forgiveness and boundary integration. True healing integrates forgiveness and boundaries. Forgiveness frees your heart from lingering resentment. Boundaries protect your energy and prevent repeated harm. Together, they create a space for emotional growth, resilience, and genuine reconnection. This integration is not optional. It is essential for moving forward without carrying the weight of someone else's choices. Story: Nathan and the romantic disappearance. Nathan's partner had disappeared without explanation. For months, he oscillated between grief and frustration. Gradually, he began to set boundaries around obsessive reflection. Forgive the absence as a reflection of their limitations. Focus on cultivating self-worth independent of another's presence. The result was subtle but profound. Peace replaced anxiety, clarity replaced confusion, and his heart felt lightened by intentional, conscious steps toward healing. Metaphor: rebuilding a bridge. Consider a bridge that has been damaged by a sudden storm. You cannot reconstruct the storm or demand it apologize. You cannot reclaim the exact moment of collapse, but you can rebuild the bridge stronger than before, fortified with awareness, wisdom, and resilience. Healing without explanation is rebuilding that bridge, stronger, wiser, and capable of supporting your journey forward. Practical steps for healing. Daily reflection. Take 10-15 minutes each day to journal thoughts and emotions, allowing clarity to emerge. Mindful breathing. Practice grounding exercises to center yourself when grief or anxiety arises. Intentional boundaries. Limit contact or emotional energy toward those whose absence or unpredictability destabilizes you. Self-compassion, rituals. Engage in acts of kindness toward yourself, affirming your inherent worth. Reconnect with passions. Pursue hobbies, learning and creative outlets that remind you of your value. Independent of others, these steps reinforce healing without requiring external validation or explanation. Healing without their explanation is a radical act of self-empowerment. It acknowledges the reality of absence while reclaiming your emotional authority. It integrates forgiveness, boundaries, reflection, and self-reconnection. In this space, grief transforms from a consuming storm into a teacher, guiding you toward resilience, insight, and peace. Even without answers, even without closure, your heart can mend, your mind can rest, your spirit can feel whole again. There is a strange gift hidden in the void left by those who disappear, the doors that slam without warning and the silences that echo endlessly. It is the wisdom that pain alone can teach, a quiet, subtle understanding that reshapes not just how we love, but who we are. At first, this gift is invisible. In the midst of grief, confusion, and heartbreak, it feels impossible that anything meaningful could emerge. Yet those departures, those unanswered questions, carry a lesson, one that strengthens the soul, illuminates our worth, and teaches a quiet, enduring form of love. The psychological lesson: understanding your emotional architecture. From a psychological perspective, pain is a mirror. Abandonment, silence, and abrupt departures reveal patterns in our attachment and emotional responses. Attachment awareness. Departures expose the ways we seek approval, validation, and closeness. Recognizing these patterns allows us to redirect energy toward healthy connections rather than chasing absent answers. Emotional detachment. Pain teaches the subtle art of holding love without clinging, of valuing connection without surrendering identity. Self-observation. Every heartbreak is a lens, magnifying unresolved fears, insecurities, and tendencies toward overthinking or self-blame. By observing our responses, we transform raw suffering into insight, and insight into emotional resilience. Story: Marcus and the mentor who vanished. Marcus had been blindsided when a mentor he trusted disappeared without explanation. The immediate response was confusion and despair, replaying every moment in search of a clue. Over time, Marcus noticed patterns. He invested disproportionately in approval. He feared rejection to the point of suppressing his own needs. He sought closure externally instead of cultivating internal understanding. Through reflection, Marcus began to recognize these tendencies not as flaws, but as invitations to growth. Pain became the teacher, revealing areas for conscious improvement and self-compassion. Spiritual insight. Departures as refinement. Faith teaches us that absence and unanswered questions can be instruments of growth. Just as gold is purified through fire, the soul is strengthened through the trials of abandonment, patience. Learning to wait without expectation fosters resilience, detachment, understanding that control over others is an illusion nurtures peace, trust, belief in the inherent value of one's life and experiences, independent of others' actions, anchors the spirit. Through this lens, departures are not punishment, but refinement. They reveal where our strength lies and where our love can mature. Metaphor. The sculptor and the stone consider a sculptor chiseling a block of stone. Each strike feels harsh, seemingly destructive. Fragments scatter, and the process can appear violent or painful. Yet without each strike, the statue would remain formless. Each blow, while uncomfortable, shapes the stone, revealing form, balance, and beauty. Similarly, departures and heartbreaks carve our inner world, exposing resilience, refining patience, and revealing the contours of our true emotional and spiritual selves. Story: Elena and the Vanished. Partner: Elena's partner left without explanation, and for months she replayed every moment. Initially, her focus was on the absence, the unanswered questions, the lost conversations, the vanished plans. Eventually, she shifted focus inward. She examined how her expectations of closure had tethered her happiness to another's actions. She noticed patterns in her attachment that fueled anxiety and self-doubt. She began to cultivate self-trust, allowing her sense of worth to exist independently of external validation. Through this process, Elena discovered that pain was not only inevitable, but instructive, guiding her toward emotional independence and spiritual understanding. Psychological reflection. The hidden strengths abandonment reveals hidden capacities within us. Resilience. The ability to endure pain and continue moving forward. Discernment. Seeing who and what truly supports our well-being. Self-worth. Recognizing that our value is inherent, not contingent on others' presence or actions. Empathy. Experiencing grief deepens compassion for ourselves and for others who struggle. Recognizing these strengths transforms heartbreak from a purely negative experience into a foundation for personal growth. Spiritual lesson: love beyond expectation. Spiritual wisdom encourages us to cultivate a form of love that is unconditional and present, even without reciprocity or explanation. Love without clinging, without needing validation. Appreciate connections while they exist, releasing them without resentment when they end. Trust that each relationship, whether fleeting or enduring, serves a purpose for learning and growth. Departures, then, are not failures of connection. They are invitations to refine how we give, receive, and understand love. Story: Liam and the Disappearing. Friend Liam's closest friend vanished suddenly. Initially, he felt abandoned, questioning his own worth. With reflection, he realized the absence revealed his deep reliance on external affirmation. It taught him to cultivate his own emotional stability. He began to extend love without expectation, valuing presence but not being dependent on it. Through this awareness, Liam transformed grief into insight, building relational strength that could withstand future disappointments. Metaphor: the river and the stones. Consider a river flowing over stones. Each rock creates turbulence, a momentary disruption. Water may seem obstructed, yet it adapts, flowing around, over, and between. Pain, like the stones, interrupts the current of life. It slows, challenges, and reshapes our path. But wisdom allows the river to flow steadily, integrating obstacles into a broader, purposeful journey. Integrating psychological and spiritual insights, healing and wisdom merge when we recognize that emotional pain is both signal and teacher. Departures illuminate patterns, attachments, and expectations that require reflection. Spiritual trust allows the heart to remain anchored, even in absence. Self-worth is independent of external validation. It is cultivated internally. By integrating psychology and spirituality, we create a framework for understanding loss, abandonment, and unanswered departures as catalysts for growth rather than permanent wounds. Story: Sophia and the Mentor. Who left Sophia's mentor disappeared unexpectedly, leaving her in despair. Through self-reflection and spiritual practice, she discovered the departure highlighted her tendency to seek validation externally. Her grief was an opportunity to cultivate internal security and trust. She began to release resentment and forgive, not for the mentor but for herself. In doing so, Sophia experienced a profound transformation. The absence no longer controlled her emotions, and she approached relationships with renewed clarity and groundedness. Metaphor: fire and the phoenix. Just as fire consumes wood to release warmth and light, emotional pain consumes old patterns to release clarity and growth. The phoenix rises not despite the fire, but because of it. Departures, silence, and unanswered questions act as this fire, uncomfortable, intense, and transformative. From their ashes emerges resilience, insight, and an awakened capacity to love and live fully. Reflection. Practice. To integrate these lessons, consider journaling. Document not only your pain, but what it reveals about your inner world. Meditation. Sit with absence without judgment, observing patterns and emotions. Gratitude. For insight, recognize that each departure teaches a lesson about yourself and about human complexity. Spiritual. Anchoring. Trust in a higher order or the inherent worthiness of your being. These practices transform raw grief into actionable wisdom. Story: Marcus and the Abandoned. Project Marcus had invested deeply in a professional partnership that dissolved without explanation. Initially, he was consumed by frustration and doubt. Through reflection and self-examination, he realized the project's end revealed reliance on external validation. He learned to invest in processes rather than outcomes, and in himself rather than others' acknowledgement. Emotional detachment allowed him to engage fully in new endeavors without fear or obsession. Pain became insight, absence became clarity, and loss became preparation for wiser, healthier relationships in all areas of life. Metaphor: the lighthouse. Once more, the lighthouse stands firm, not controlling the storm, but illuminating a safe passage. Wisdom from pain is the lighthouse within your heart. It does not eliminate suffering. It does not guarantee the return of what was lost, but it ensures you navigate life's challenges with clarity, presence, and groundedness. Departures and unanswered questions may continue to arise, yet wisdom allows you to face them with serenity and strength. There is a profound silence in the moments after the storm. The questions have been asked, the absence has been felt, and the heart has carried the weight of unanswered departures. And yet, within this silence lies an opportunity, the chance to reclaim yourself, to find peace even when closure never arrives. If you've ever felt the ache of being left without explanation, this is the moment where that ache can transform, not into bitterness, but into quiet strength, clarity, and self-discovery. The art of reflection is not mere rumination. It is a deliberate, gentle turning inward, a way of observing your emotions without being consumed by them. Reflection allows the heart to understand patterns of attachment and expectation, acknowledge grief without judgment, discover what is truly yours to hold and what must be released. Think of it as walking along a calm riverbank. The water reflects the sky, the trees, and the distant hills. You observe, you notice, but you do not dive recklessly into the current. Reflection provides perspective, space, and clarity. Story: Lila and the Letters That Never Came. Lila had waited for months for a letter, a call, a sign of explanation from someone she loved. When none arrived, she could have sunk into despair. Instead, she chose reflection. She wrote letters she never sent, expressing emotions she could not share elsewhere. She sat quietly each morning, noting the sensations in her body and heart without judgment. She recognized her own resilience in the face of absence. Through these practices, Lila realized that her power did not reside in receiving answers. It resided in tending her own inner world. Reclaiming joy peace is not merely the absence of pain, it is the presence of fulfillment. Reclaiming joy requires rediscovering activities that nourish your spirit, engaging in moments of gratitude, however small, recognizing that your happiness is independent of others' actions or explanations. Joy does not always come with fireworks or grand events. Often, it is found in quiet mornings, warm sunlight, a shared laugh, or the stillness of a breath. It is subtle, yet profoundly sustaining. Story: Marcus and the Solitary Walks. Marcus had been abandoned by a friend without reason. In the initial months, he felt hollow, restless, and uncertain. Gradually, he began taking long walks alone, noticing the rhythm of his steps as a grounding force. the way the world continued to turn, beautiful and indifferent, the subtle pleasure of movement, observation and presence. In these solitary walks, Marcus found a quiet joy, a reclamation of his inner life that was untouched by anyone else's choices. Mindfulness as a path to reclamation. Mindfulness allows the mind to witness itself without judgment. It is a practice that teaches presence, acceptance, and self-compassion, breath awareness. Focus on each inhale and exhale, anchoring yourself to the present moment. Emotional observation. Notice grief, longing, or anxiety as passing experiences, not permanent truths. Gratitude practice. Acknowledge simple blessings, the warmth of sunlight, the taste of food, the feeling of stillness. Through mindfulness, the heart learns that it can hold absence without being destroyed by it. It can contain longing without being consumed. Story. Elena and the morning ritual. Elena had felt abandoned by a partner who vanished without explanation. She began a daily morning ritual, 5 minutes of breath-focused meditation, journaling a single sentence of gratitude, a mindful walk around her neighborhood, noticing colors, sounds, and textures. Over time, these small acts cultivated a sense of reclamation. Her heart, once tethered to absence, began to breathe freely. Metaphor. The garden of self. Consider your inner world as a garden. Abandonment may feel like frost or drought, leaving patches barren and withered. Reclamation is tending that garden, pulling weeds of self-doubt and resentment, planting seeds of curiosity, compassion and presence, watering with patience and self-kindness, allowing growth to occur naturally. Even in barren seasons, the garden can recover. The soil is fertile, ready for new life. Understanding. Solitude. Solitude is not loneliness. Solitude is a chance to reconnect with your own thoughts and values, heal emotional wounds without external distraction, build a foundation for future connections that are grounded in self-awareness rather than dependency. When you embrace solitude, you discover that your worth does not require validation from another person. Your presence in your own life is enough. Story. Nathan and the week of silence. Nathan's partner left abruptly. For a week he isolated himself, initially in despair. Slowly, he began to listen to his own thoughts without immediately seeking external answers. Identify emotions that had gone unacknowledged for years. Recognize desires, fears, and strengths independent of the relationship. This week of intentional solitude became a turning point. Nathan discovered an inner peace that no absence could disturb. Cultivating self-compassion. Reclamation requires gentleness with oneself. Self-compassion allows you to treat yourself as you would a cherished friend. Validate your own grief without judgment. Recognize that your reactions, emotions, and patterns are human and understandable. Self-compassion is not indulgence, it is a foundation. It is the first step toward trusting your heart and reclaiming joy. Metaphor. The river that returns. Imagine a river blocked by debris. Initially, the water stagnates, trapped and turbulent. With time, patience, and gentle guidance, the river finds a new course, flowing steadily once more. Your emotional life, too, can redirect. Absence and unanswered questions may have damned your heart temporarily, but reflection and reclamation allow it to find its natural course again, nourishing yourself and those you allow close. Story. Sophia and her rediscovered passions. Sophia's partner vanished suddenly, leaving her adrift. Over time, she began to revisit hobbies and passions she had abandoned, reconnect with friends who were consistent and nurturing, engage in creative expression as a form of self-affirmation. Through these acts, Sophia's life regained color, rhythm, and joy. Her fulfillment was no longer contingent on someone else's presence, and her heart felt steady and whole again. Reflection on relationships. As you reclaim peace, it becomes clear that not every connection requires closure to provide lessons, but emotional nourishment is first and foremost self-sourced. healthy. Relationships are those that complement your wholeness rather than define it. Reclamation teaches discernment, understanding which bonds to cultivate, which to release, and which to simply observe with gratitude and detachment. Story: Liam and the mentorship that ended. Liam's mentor disappeared, leaving him with questions and self-doubt. Through reflection, he recognized lessons that were truly valuable versus those he had misattributed to the relationship. He cultivated gratitude for the insights while releasing expectations for further explanation. He rebuilt confidence in his own decision-making, independent of guidance from others. This reclamation of peace allowed Liam to engage fully with new opportunities, grounded in clarity and self-trust. Metaphor: light. Returning to the forest after a storm, the forest is quiet. Broken branches lie scattered and the path seems unclear, yet gradually light returns through the canopy. Reclamation is this light. It illuminates your inner world, restores clarity, and allows growth to flourish. Absence may have darkened the forest temporarily, but your own presence brings illumination and renewal. Integrating reflection and reclamation to fully embrace peace in solitude. Reflect daily. Observe emotions, patterns, and insights without judgment. Reclaim joy. Engage in activities and relationships that nourish, not deplete. Embrace solitude. Treat alone time as restorative, not punishing. Practice self-compassion. Acknowledge your worth, effort, and resilience. Recognize wisdom in pain. Let departures and absences teach lessons, not anchor resentment. These steps allow the heart to regain balance, clarity, and resilience. Peace is not the absence of longing, nor the absence of unanswered questions. It is the presence of self-trust, emotional independence, and steady joy. Through reflection and reclamation, you learn to hold your own heart, cherish your own presence, and find fulfillment within yourself. Even in the quietest, loneliest spaces, your inner world can bloom. Even when closure never comes, your soul can be anchored, whole, and vibrant. Take a deep breath. Let the weight you have carried settle gently. Feel the quiet around you, the stillness in your heart. And know this: you are seen, you are valued, and you are whole. Even when others have left without explanation, your worth is not measured by the presence or absence of someone else. It is inherent, eternal, and unshakable. Though doors may have closed, voices may have faded, and silence may have stretched longer than comfort allows, your life, your heart, and your story remain intact. Acknowledgement of pain. It is natural to grieve the absence, to wonder why explanations never came, why bridges were burned without notice, why love or care sometimes vanished too soon. This grief is real. It matters. It is not a weakness to feel it deeply. It is a mark of your humanity. And in feeling it, you honor your heart, your capacity to care, and your capacity to love, even when love was not returned or reciprocated in the way you hoped. Affirmation of wholeness. Hear this clearly. You are complete, not because others affirm you, not because answers arrived on time, but because your existence is enough. Your heart is whole, even if it aches. Your spirit remains resilient, even if it feels fragile. Your life carries meaning, even if some chapters ended abruptly or without closure. Closure does not define your wholeness. Your courage, your compassion, and your willingness to continue moving forward do. Metaphor: the oak that stands alone. Imagine a great oak standing alone on a hill. Storms may lash at it, winds may break some branches, and leaves may scatter. But the oak stands firm, its roots run deep. Its strength is unseen beneath the soil, unshaken by what passes above. Like the oak, you are anchored. Your strength is not always visible, and your value is not always acknowledged by others. Yet it is real, enduring, and profound. Spiritual affirmation. Even when silence feels like abandonment, the divine does not turn away. There is a presence, a quiet witness that sees every tear, hears every unspoken question, and holds every moment of your pain. You are not abandoned. You are embraced. You are held in grace, even when human hands and voices have withdrawn. Story: Naomi and the unexpected. Calm Naomi had felt the abrupt departure of a close friend, a mentor, and a lover, all at different points in her life. Each time the silence felt unbearable, but in time she discovered that her heart could carry grief without fracturing, that she could love, hope, and trust again without needing explanations, that her life had meaning independent of those who left. Naomi's peace came not from their return or from answers, but from recognizing her own wholeness, her own capacity to endure, and her own power to continue. Integrating the lessons. Let this blessing sink in. Your worth is inherent. No absence, no silence, no departure can diminish it. Your heart is resilient. Even after being left, it remains capable of love and connection. Your life has meaning. Each chapter, whether filled with presence or punctuated by absence, contributes to the depth of your story. Your story continues. Departures are chapters, not conclusions. In these truths lies the comfort and empowerment you carry forward. You are not defined by those who left. You are defined by your courage, your compassion, and your commitment to live fully, even in the face of unanswered questions. Metaphor: the lighthouse that remains. Consider the lighthouse on a rocky shore. Storms may rage, ships may pass without noticing its light, waves may crash violently, yet the lighthouse continues to shine. It does not rely on acknowledgement, it does not require gratitude, it simply fulfills its purpose, offering guidance and light. Your life is like this lighthouse. Even when others fail to see your light, it continues to shine. Your presence matters, your love matters, your story matters. Closing blessing, so let this be your anchor tonight. May you feel the deep, unshakable truth that your heart is complete. May you carry your own light even when others turn away. May your spirit find calm in the quiet, strength in solitude, and joy in the moments that are fully yours. May your story continue with meaning, courage, and grace. Even if doors slam without warning, even if answers never arrive, and even if silence lingers, know this: you are whole. You are seen. You are loved. Not only by those who remain, but by life itself, and by the quiet, steadfast presence that holds all things together. Final affirmation: they may have left without closure, but your life, your heart, and your story continue with meaning and grace. Your worth does not require explanation. Your love does not demand acknowledgement. Your presence is enough. Carry this truth with you into every tomorrow. Stand firmly in your wholeness. Shine your light even in the shadows. And know in the deepest part of your being that you are complete, now and always.